You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 56. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm Katie Wardrobe, a music technology education trainer, speaker and consultant from midnightmusic.com.au, where I help music teachers use technology effectively in music education. First of all today, I wanted to give a shout out to a listener whose iTunes handle is TKate5. She left a lovely 5-star review and she said, "I've gotten so many great teaching ideas from Katie and her guests. I took a few years away from teaching to be with my young children, but technology doesn't wait. This podcast has helped me to catch up with what's possible with technology in the music classroom and has opened my eyes to so many possibilities." Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. I love hearing about what you all think of the podcast, and every time someone leaves a review, it really does give the show a little boost in iTunes. So if you have time to leave one yourself and you haven't already done that, I would so appreciate it. Now, in this episode, I talk all things STEAM with Shawna Longo from New Jersey. Shawna was actually a guest on an earlier episode, number 53, but she's back today to tell us about some STEAM lessons that she's been doing with her students. We mentioned quite a few links and videos, which I've gone ahead and listed on the show notes page for this episode at midnightmusic.com.au/56. And I also decided to write down an outline of the lesson ideas, or lesson units really they are, that Shawna mentioned during the episode, just in case you're not in a position to take notes while you're listening right now. So you can download those on the same page that I mentioned. So midnightmusic.com.au/56. Here's my chat with Shawna. Today I'm welcoming back Shawna Longo, who is the music educator, STEAM facilitator and arts integration specialist at Hopatcong Borough Schools in New Jersey. Shawna was my guest on episode 53 and we had so much that we wanted to cover that we decided up front, even before we recorded that episode, that we would record two. Now in the previous episode, which was number 53, we talked about using technology in the ensemble rehearsal room, and Shawna talked about using Chromebooks, but her ideas in that episode can really apply to any device you might be using. So I'd encourage everyone to go back and listen to that episode because there were some great ideas for integrating technology. Today, we're going to shift the focus onto her experiences with STEAM and the lessons that she's run with students, and also her role as a STEAM facilitator for her district. So welcome back, Shawna.
Hello.
It's great to have you back. And I know that last time we spoke, you were in the throes of doing an arts integration certification course, and I think it's sort of coming up towards the end of that. So how's that been going?
Oh, it's amazing. It's been such a good experience. It's through Education Closet, and it really has kind of forced me to do a lot of reflection and really kind of hone in my practice and the ins and outs of what arts integration and STEAM are and what they aren't. It's been really amazing, and connecting with people all around the country and around the world through this certification program.
Yeah, I actually had a look at, I actually went there this morning just to look at the course itself and the sorts of things that were covered, and I didn't realise how comprehensive it is. It's actually an entire year's worth of course with multiple kind of modules, which they call sprints, I think, don't they? So you sort of do the work for a section of time, and then there's a little break, and then you do the next one, and then there's a little break. And I'm presuming the breaks are in there so that you can like digest the information and maybe even put some things into practice. Has it worked that way for you?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So it has been a full year commitment.
Wow.
And each sprint there's 6 sprints, and they're 6 weeks each, with about 3 to 4 weeks in between. And you really need that time to kind of really digest what you've done, reflect upon it, and absolutely put it into practice. And it's been really neat because the way Susan Riley set it up, each of the lessons or each of the sprints, I should say, has fallen neatly with how the school year kind of rolls out. So as I'm finishing a sprint, it's like perfect timing for where I am in my work, that I'm able to immediately put it into practice, and it just keeps building. So it's been really awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. It looks really, really good. I'm intrigued to know, and I'm thinking actually I might try and get Susan on the podcast at some point to talk about what she's doing, because she's doing some great stuff there.
Today, I watched the video for our final sprint, and she said something like, "Yeah, and you'll get your PD certificate at the end for, I think it was like 740 hours." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's totally accurate." I mean, it's been a huge commitment, but it's been one of the most worthwhile commitments. In terms of really good PD and kind of learning experience.
Yeah. It's so funny. I actually read that number as well on the webpage, and I thought that ticks the box. In Australia, we have this, like over 5 years, I think it's 5 years, you need to have 100 hours of PD done. And I thought, well, there you go. You're done for like 7 years.
We have the same thing. It's 100 over 5 years. It's like...
Hilarious.
I'm good for many, many years.
And I like that philosophy of having the break, because I think the thing that I find in running PD and workshops and online courses and that sort of thing, it's all very well to take in the information and get really excited about it, which most people do, but it really is irrelevant unless you take it back and do something, and particularly kind of get onto it straight away, because I'm guilty of this too. I'll get excited about something. I'll read a fabulous book, and it can be on any topic, music or education or finance stuff or entrepreneurship or whatever, and you can get all excited, but unless you actually implement some of the ideas that you've read about, then there's no use in having done it in the first place.
Right, exactly.
You've got to be disciplined.
The other nice part was that because it's that year long, so once you implement what you've learned, you're still working with your coach and your mentor, and you still have your cohort of individuals that are following up with you. Like, how's it going?
Yes.
What's going on? How are you doing? So it's not like you hit that PD, you learn the tasks, and then you're on your own to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, you have that constant feedback and that personal connection to really help you kind of grow your practice.
I think it's something that I've been thinking about doing in my own online community, and even perhaps in a free kind of way as well, because obviously the community is a paid space. So to do something where it's like a uniform challenge, or kind of like a challenge, I suppose. It might be like 30 days to, implement technology better in your classroom or something like that, where there's a group of people working through together. It works really well. You see it online all the time with, a green smoothie challenge or a fitness challenge, and people love that sort of community aspect of it, and we're all doing this together. So I think it would be something that's good to include in my things as well. So, yep, definitely something to consider. So much to do all the time, though. Now, I wanted to talk in today's episode with regard to the STEAM things, a few different things. So, first of all, the definition of STEAM, what it is and what it isn't, because I come across quite a few different opinions about what that is, and maybe some lesson ideas, breaking down a couple of lessons that you've done with students, and perhaps different approaches for age groups that people might be working for, from elementary right through to senior students. Now, I'm going to keep a list of what we talk about today, and I'll put it together in the show notes page for the episode and have a handout for people to download. So there'll be some, some dot points about what we've talked about and ideas and that sort of thing. So go there if you want to grab that after the episode's ended. But maybe you can just start with, what is STEAM? Lots of misinformation, I think, out there. So can you just tell me what your definition is?
So for me, STEAM is emphasizing the importance of STEM, so science, technology, engineering, math. But I contend that when you go with STEAM, the arts can create new ways of seeing, thinking, and learning. So this connection is what's going to stimulate the inquiry, the dialogue, and the critical thinking through those STEM courses. It's giving STEM content a different pathway to again, see, hear, and understand the world around the kids. So making it really come to life, because we miss things. We don't really dive deep, and the arts kind of give us a different lens to look at them and a different lens for the kids to be able to show their knowledge. So really kind of thinking about that whole multiple intelligences and how kids learn and what works for them and giving them more options. And for me, STEAM, when they put the A in STEAM, it's really bringing out the importance of creativity and innovation.
Yeah, that's the part I really like. And I think a number of things that we do as music educators kind of just naturally are STEAM type lessons or exercises anyway, and it's just really putting some kind of definition on it. So anytime you're doing science of sound kind of activities, that really naturally leads to being a STEAM lesson. So I'm sure that's one of the ones that, a lot of people do. And are there any rules for STEAM? I've had a few discussions with different teachers that I know about there being specific rules that need to be in place to make it a STEAM lesson, i.e. the use of the engineering design process as the kind of guiding format for the lesson. Is that something that you do, or do you think it's an optional thing?
Well, I hate to call them rules because I feel like, and I still in my own practice, I'm kind of mulling over all of this and kind of really trying to kind of figure out my philosophy, if you, for lack of a better word for it. But I think some of the key points are, one, with STEAM is making authentic real world connections for kids between contents and the real world. And the other thing is shifting from a teacher-centered teaching model to a more student-centered inquiry-based. So, the teacher giving up the reins a little bit and kind of moderating and facilitating the kids guiding that learning. I mean, you're going to provide an outline for them maybe, or the course, but really allowing them to make mistakes, allowing them to relook at things, to try new things, to be willing to think outside of the box and come up with, crazy ideas that it might fail, and that's okay, because we often learn more through failure than we do through immediate success. And I think that as much as, people don't want to hear that, but embracing failure is okay, and it's part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's really, really important for it. And it's funny because I actually started reading a book called Present Over Perfect by Shawna Longo. And today she stated something, and I actually tweeted it out today because I found it really, really appropriate for this whole conversation. But it was, creativity, of course, is so easy and natural for children, and most adults struggle to recover that wild courage to make and imagine and play.
So true, yeah. It
talks about, how, little kids are so creative and embracing trying new things. And then as they go through school, and, Sir Ken Robinson has talked about this for, ever. But what are we doing to keep nurturing that in children as they grow versus kind of pulling back the reins and keeping it so regimented? So I think that's really important for STEAM. And I think that's a good point to make in really reaching these kids.
Yeah, I think so too. And the all of those things that you mentioned, like inquiry-based learning and project-based learning and STEAM, they're all kind of linked into one another, sort of one and the same, or variations of. And it's such a great thing to do in music. It's always the approach that I've liked with learning a software program, for instance. You take the project, what is it that you actually want to do first, and then you kind of just try and find the way to do it in the software program or whatever it is in life. And it's such a great way to learn, because this is how I've learned everything to do with music technology. I've sort of sat there going, a lead sheet in Sibelius, I need to do that. And then, when you don't know the program at all, you sit there going, okay, I need that font, which is more like a lead sheet font. Okay, first question, how do I do that? And then you go on to how do I make chord symbols above, or how do I do chords with slashes underneath in the thing, And it's a project, and you just tick all the boxes and sort of work everything out as you go along. And the STEAM projects are so good for that, when you kind of just present the thing, here's the thing you need to do. Can we change the pitch of, water in a jar? How can we make different pitches, and what do we need to do that? That's all you need to say to the kids, and then they can go off and work it out themselves. Right. Yeah.
I even do that with learning new programs. Like when I introduce NoteFlight to my kids, I give them a score and I say, go make your blank screen look exactly like this.
Yes.
And let them figure out where the buttons are and how do I do this. And and what is this symbol, because they got to know what it's called in order to figure out how to insert it.
Yeah, great point.
And so it's that inquiry based. I mean, something as simple as just learning a new program and letting them just figure it out and setting them loose.
Yeah, such a good thing. Such a good thing. It's such a better way to learn too, because I think that when I do it that way, I'm much more likely to remember how to do it in the first place. Whereas if you kind of just have someone telling you, and I do think that this is it's a, what's it called? It's a negative about us as adults is that you get to that point that you're waiting for someone to tell you all the time. I've had people in workshops who literally will not touch their mouse until I tell them to go click here and do this. And for me, my way of learning a software program or anything is to open it up, and first thing I do is I click through all the menus just to see what's in there. I'm not expecting to remember it. I'm just looking, and then I go, oh, I didn't know it did that thing. I can see that listed. That's a great way to just sort of get a handle on what it can do, and then you work through, the specifics of doing something. So such a great
absolutely.
approach.
I find that many, with the focus on testing and standardized tests that we have here in the United States, kids nowadays expect there's a right and a wrong, and tell me exactly how to do it, and I'm going to do exactly that. So, like, I know when they come to my classroom, it takes a while for me to literally break them down.
Yeah.
So that they are comfortable putting themselves into things and just figure it out. There is no right and wrong answer. And that blows their minds.
Yeah.
And many of them struggle because they just want, is it A, is it B, is it C, or is it D? And that's not the world I live in. And that's not my classroom. And so it's definitely a shift, but it's nice that with the STEAM initiatives that are happening, it's happening in more classrooms. So it makes my room a little bit easier because it's happening more frequently. And especially if you start with the lower grades and then wait for it to trickle up to you, it's going to change the way, teachers have to approach things.
Yeah, that's great.
And give them that freedom to let the kids take a little bit more lead instead of tell me the answer or give me the question and I will get you the answer.
Yeah. And in your own school, have you been leading the way with the STEAM activities, or are there a number of teachers at the school who are all kind of doing it at the same time, learning as you go?
So, all of the above.
Yep, that's good.
So I serve as a STEAM facilitator and arts integration coach. So I have, in addition to teaching music technology classes, I also have time built into my schedule to be coaching and working with teachers, either co-teaching or helping them develop lesson plans or units or assessments surrounding arts integration and STEAM lessons or units that they may want. Or maybe we meet to discuss I have this lesson the kids really have trouble with. Is there a way I could try to teach it through the arts that may have them understand it better? So it's kind of all of the above. So I'm there to help people. But then there are many that are just doing it on their own, but then they'll come and share hey, I did this or I did that. And then it'll spark a conversation. Ooh, you could have done this, or next time, why don't you try that? So I think it's a little bit of both, and it just depends on the teachers. Some don't want to do it at all. They're comfortable. I have so much in my curriculum. I have to cover this, and that's the way it is. And trying to get them to understand that STEAM and arts integration it's not more to add on to their plate.
Yeah, it's just
Instead
a shift.
of taking the highway, the highway you always take to get to that, teach that standard, you're just going to get there a different way. It doesn't have to take any longer. It doesn't have to add more on your plate. It's just a different way to get to the same goal.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And do you find teachers that are implementing STEAM lessons are doing it kind of by themselves in their own classes, or is there much cross-curricular work going on? So taking the science of sound type example, that fits really well with music lessons, obviously, but it also fits really well with science. So are there teachers that are working together to sort of match up lessons or units of work?
Yeah, so that's part of my role, and some of my colleagues' role is to help match up finding the natural connections between content areas. So looking at curriculums, I took all the teachers kind of submitted a bullet list of the topics they cover through the year, broad, and then I combined that all into one document so everyone could see by subject and grade what everyone else was doing.
Oh, wow. That's
very
impressive.
Generalized. throughout the year. I mean, literally, I was like, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Give me your top 10 things in order. This doesn't have to be a dissertation.
Yeah.
So that people could look through and like, ooh, that piques my interest, or oh, I loved that book, or I loved this, and try to find things that can bring people together. And then from there, see where it evolves, whether it evolves into something STEAM, something arts integration, or just a really good, passionate teachers working together, teaching.
That's fabulous. That's a really great idea.
And it might be that, I tell teachers when they're kind of like, I don't know where to start. And I'll say, what's your least favorite thing to teach? And they look at you and I'm like, come on, we all have that thing that isn't our thing, but it's our standards and we have to do it. I'm like, start there. Maybe make it something that you enjoy, because your kids will probably connect more to it if you have more passion in the delivery.
Yeah. So do you have an example of one of those things that someone said to you? I'll put you on the spot, I know.
You totally put me on the spot. Let me think. So one was teaching ratios. Mm-hmm. So, and the teacher was like, and in that instance, it wasn't necessarily the teacher didn't like to teach it, but it was the kids struggled, or the kids they didn't get when am I ever going to use that? And that's one of the things that STEAM and arts integration can show the kids, how this actually applies in real life. So for that, we created a lesson on studying pipe organs, and we utilized boom whackers, which I don't care who you are, ages 2 to 90, everybody loves.
I totally want a reason to buy myself a set. I don't even know what it's going to be. I'm just going to buy a set anyway, just because.
I can give you lots of ideas. Actually, I told my kids we were going no tech and doing some boom whackers for like 5 classes, and they're composing a song and they're loving it, and they're 13, but they think it's the best thing ever, and they're so focused. Anyway, it's great. So anyway, so what we did was we had the kids measure the boom whackers, because that's tangible. We talked about, where do you see pipes? We talked about, in churches, in various places that they may be, Yankee Stadium, things like that. Where do you hear an organ? And then making it more real was taking the boom whackers, they measured them, and then they had to figure out the fractional the ratio of each pipe. How do we get each pitch? So what is the fractional going off of like low C? How do we get each pitch to make it that? What does the length have to be of the tubes?
Awesome.
So it made it very real for them. Now they understand, like, here's a practical use for learning fractions. So that was 6th grade. And then in 7th grade, I paired up with the science teacher. And she, actually, this is where she said to me, she goes, listen, I'm tone deaf. I'm musically challenged. I'm terrible. She said, and I always struggle teaching sound waves. She's like, would you come in and help me out?
Brilliant.
She's like, that's where I need help. So now we just layered in from 6th grade doing the boom whackers with the ratio to now 7th grade curriculum in science. Now we're coming back to visiting with the boom whackers and talking about sound waves and amplitude and frequency and wavelength. So now they're seeing the use of the same concept in a different way.
That's
the same
cool.
tool, I guess, the same music tool, but now we're going to kind of kick it up a notch. And what we also did was we really kicked it up a notch, and we took our kids on a field trip to St. John the Divine Church in New York City. It's up in Morning Heights, up by Columbia University's campus. And we took them in and we contacted the organist, who's also a professor at Juilliard in Oregon. And he was so excited that someone reached out to him. I mean, he's a full-time organist. I mean, that's unusual in and of itself. And we went for a concert in the cathedral. We did in the church. We did a tour, and then the kids got to sit, and he brought them up into the organ loft, and they got to watch him, and we did a Q&A. So now the whole thing came to life for them of this lesson. It was awesome.
That's so cool.
That's one of the big things that we, my colleagues and I have been, I don't want to say pushing with STEAM, but not only doing the lessons, but then finding a way to really bring it to life for the kids and take those field trips or Skype in. We could have Skyped the guy in. If you can't get there, figure out a way. Skype opens all kinds of doors for ways to connect up with people. And I think it really adds another level of really making teaching real for the kids. Why do I have to learn this? Well, here's an application. Here it is in real life.
Oh, I love that idea so much. I'm just thinking about the organ and generally because most kids would hear an organ and just be bored out of their brain straight away. And I mean, I have, memories of growing up singing in churches a lot. And I don't dislike the organ as such, but I didn't love it either. But I think if I had known all of that information about the organ and even used boom whackers, and then, I mean, basically an organ is a series of boom whackers, with the pipes. I mean, if I'd known all of that, I kind of maybe would have been much more excited about the organ as well. So it kind of works both ways. And it's such a great thing.
And,
I love that.
And bringing in like that whole application in American baseball of the organ and playing, like that pulls the kids in too. So again, finding those connections to make learning come alive. Yeah. And that's really kind of my philosophy of STEAM and arts integration. How can we make content come alive for kids?
Yeah, so great, so great. So that's an awesome example of a lesson or even a few lessons, and even an entire unit of work really. So that's such a great
and I will give you one more cool thing.
Yeah, please.
With that whole, when we did it with 7th grade with sound waves, have you heard of, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Chladni plates or
yes with the little what do you call it, sand on the plates, and the vibrations create beautiful patterns. I'll link to a great video that is probably one that you've shown your students as well, where there's a whole series of amazing things that you can see patterns with the sound waves, and very visual. It's very cool. So where did that fit in?
Yeah, that's a great intro for that lesson, because now the kids can see like the sound wave, and how it affects and what happens. And I've actually even pulled in a visual arts component and had them recreate what pattern is made by the sand on the Chladni plate. Sorry if I'm butchering that. And then pulling in visual art concepts where they had to like sketch it out and talk about the different components and why, depending on the higher the frequency, the more intricate the pattern, and explaining all that. Very cool stuff.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm so impressed.
So that's kind of kicking it up a few notches.
That's brilliant. Oh, I love that.
Thank you.
Oh, it's so good. Actually, I remember Cherie Herring, who we both know, she did a unit with her students as well, using that same video and talking about frequencies and stuff too. So I'll link to that in the show notes too, because I know this stuff is so useful for people. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music Community. The Midnight Music Community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information and a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast, visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. And I know that you do an invent your own instrument type of unit with your students. What year level was that with? That was a little bit older, wasn't it?
I did it with 6th grade.
Oh, okay. I was 6th grade.
But that's one of those units where you could adapt it. Do it. You could adapt it K to 12. Honestly,
yeah. Adults would love to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've even done it with kindergartners and pulled in like makeys.
Yes.
And things like that. So you can really adapt that across grade levels. And whether it happens in the music classroom or the other content is just really figure out what works for you. And if there's someone else that wants to pair up, I'm big on the whole STEAM and arts integration and using it as advocacy, as you well know, and anyone who listened to my last podcast. But, anytime you can bring the arts into other classes is just going to help elevate your programs. And I feel like this is a great vehicle for us to showcase the importance and how the arts can be used to really bring these contents to life for kids.
Absolutely.
You may have kids that flourish in music classes, but, I have many of students who struggle the rest of their day, but for some reason it all just clicks. So if I can use music or the arts to help those other contents click for them, it's only going to benefit everybody involved.
Yeah, and I think, growing up, I found a lot of subjects were taught in a very isolated way. And I think if I had done that boomwhackers thing with ratios and, then moving on also to the sounds, like sound waves and frequencies and stuff, I would have been so much more interested in maths, which I was okay. I was pretty good at maths, but just didn't love doing it, just didn't really care so much because it was always that thing of when am I going to use this? And the science stuff too, I just found that those sorts of things so dry. But I think if this sort of style of teaching had been around, I would have had much bigger interest in those things. And yeah, perhaps, I don't know, but you don't know where your life would end up, but it would have been much more interesting.
Correct.
Totally much more interesting.
It would. Yeah, and it opens doors. I feel like it opens doors for kids to really also explore career. Like, what do I want to do with my life? It's giving them, when you talk about college and career readiness, these kinds of initiatives are, when you're making those real world applications, you're giving them experiences to figure out what do they really love and what is out there for them, or, where do their interests really lie to become happy in life.
Exactly. And can you tell us a bit more about the Invent an Instrument lessons that you did? So you started off, how did you start off with the kids? What was their brief?
So their brief was 2 weeks before I start the project, I tell them to start bringing in clean garbage. And they
I love the phrase clean garbage. That's great.
Well, you have to state that.
You don't want yogurt containers with yogurt in them still, which goes fairy.
Exactly. So, and I would say, think about, when you're bringing it in, think about different sounds it might make. So different materials are going to make different sounds, and how could they function? And so I'll give them some examples, or I'll have examples, and we'll hit them or strum them, or, and I talk about the different families of instruments, because even in 6th grade, they could use a little reviewer. I mean, I love my elementary music teachers, but you got to keep going over things again and again to make it stick.
And do you talk about the families with regard to, there's different ways to classify. So it could be string versus wood or whatever, or it's hitting versus, what are the other ones? I've forgotten. There's about 4 different classifications for hitting and the vibrations, I think. I can't remember them. Would you tell me?
I classify as woodwind, brass, percussion, strings.
Okay, so you relate it to that. Yep, great. Yep.
So I relate it to that, and I'll show them. And all of that discussion is not, it's not surface. I'm doing it with a lens of the science side of sound production. So why are these instruments all together? Well, it's because of how they produce sound. Well, what makes them produce the sound that they produce? So you're really digging, and again, that can be tailored dependent upon the age group.
Yeah.
That obviously is where you have to kind of differentiate, but it's really with that lens of how do they produce sound, because that's what's going to lead them. And I don't let them duplicate an instrument that already exists. They have to create their own. So utilize what we've learned about how the materials that exist in these instruments, okay, what these instruments are made of, and how that helps them to produce the sound. So how can we combine different elements to create something new once we know about sound production?
That's cool.
So we talk about the Blue Man Group a lot because,
Perfect example.
It's an engaging, great example. And actually, I have to give them credit because that's where I kind of came up with this project, because many moons ago, they were running an Invent an Instrument, I just blanked, contest.
Oh, right.
And
a contest.
they were asking for submission. This was like 8 years ago. or 8 years ago, and they were asking for submissions for students, and then the winner got to perform on stage live with them.
How brilliant. They are so good.
So cool. So I kind of took it and made it my own. But I loved the idea and kind of using them as a springboard to pull the kids in and get them excited about it.
Awesome.
And then you're talking about the science behind it, and then giving them, and I always make, you had mentioned about the engineering design process. So I'm going to pull that into this conversation because we didn't get to it before. And there's 7 steps to the engineering design process. Identify the needs and constraints, research the problem, imagine, develop possible solutions, plan, select a promising solution, create, test and evaluate, and then improve. And through Education Closet and Susan Riley's work, when you modify that to integrate the arts into that engineering and design, it's broken down into 5 steps. So the first is observe and investigate. So look at the world, get an idea from a current product or a problem. So that's where my kids are looking at what's out there. How do these instruments produce sound? Okay. Then ask probing questions and discover. So figure out what could be solutions. What could we merge together? What means of sound production do we want to combine to make this new instrument? Would we create a new classification of family of instruments because of this? Then building knowledge and connections. So, take the skills and knowledges that they're now applying to solve that problem.
Yes.
And then the 4th step is the actual creation. I always make my kids sketch it out first. I want it sketched, and I want all the parts labeled. What is everything going to be? Because you got to really think about it before you just start wasting tape and cutting things up. Yeah. And then you cut it wrong because you didn't think it through about how this would actually function.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part. And then lastly, analyze, revise, reflect. And that's such an important, the 5th step is so important, where I have them present it. But first they have to have some peers come over and give them feedback. Not from me.
Yeah.
Peers feedback, self-reflection and peer reflection before teacher assessment.
And how do they provide that feedback? Are they writing something down or just verbally saying it to the other student?
So there's a couple factors that would determine that. One, how much time do I have?
Yeah. It's often my question to other teachers. They're like, I want to do this. Okay, how much time do you have?
Yeah, that's the reality. And what is your focus? And that may also depend upon the kids that you have. Yeah. I vary that dependent upon the group of kids I have. And I may have, I may be doing this with 2 different 6th grade classes at the same time, but I may do it differently with both because it's a different mix of kids. So I need to meet their needs and try to give them the most success with it. Where some kids may really struggle with writing, well, I'm not going to force them to write because they're going to shut down.
Yeah.
So now we're going to do a more verbal, or I'm going to give an outline where it's much more condensed, their feedback.
Yeah.
I've seen a great one, like 2 stars and a wish. I don't know if you've heard of that. So,
oh, no, that's a good one.
2 stars and a wish. So the 2 stars would be 2 things you really like. And then the wish would be, how could they make it better?
I like the terminology of a wish because you do want kids to sort of think about critical, and I mean it not in a negative critical way, but you want kids to critically look at work, but you don't want them to be negative in the same time, and it needs to be, constructive criticism, we all want that. So terming it as a wish is kind of good. I like that.
Thanks. Yeah. So, and it works well with really younger kids because you can literally just have stars like images, and a wish be like a shooting star or something, where then or I use emojis sometimes, and they have to circle like a happy emoji or sad, or depending on how I want to frame it. So you really have to know your kids, and maybe it's just a verbal feedback, and I'm kind of walking around and just listening to it, and helping guide kids. Yeah. If it's a very surface feedback, kind of probing and pushing them out of their comfort zone to dig a little deeper. So you can do it a multitude of ways. It's just a matter of what's going to work for you and your kids in the time that you have.
Yeah, great point. Really good
I've also
point.
done like, gallery walks where they have to put out paper and then they just go around and just analyze each other's.
Yeah.
That kind of thing works really well too.
Excellent.
But I think that it's a really, really important step that has to be there.
Yeah. And so after that point, they then perhaps go back and make some changes if they need to, or maybe it's really cool as it is and they leave it that way.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And then after that is when we share it as a class.
Yeah.
And I typically, with the Invent an Instrument, they have to compose a short little, dependent whether it's pitches or just rhythm, but a little melody or rhythm sequence that they have to perform on the instrument. So now I'm adding in a little level of composition and performance where they have to keep that steady beat and they have to, showcase that instrument and what its capabilities are in terms of, now we're talking melody. Can it do harmony? Is it just rhythm? What about dynamics, tone color? So we're pulling in those main, vocabulary that we utilize in music, and we're applying it to this new instrument they've invented, and they've got to be thinking about that in the process of creating it. So I'll have guiding questions for them when they're in the ask probing questions or building knowledge phase that they have to kind of answer and think about as they're drafting what this instrument will look like.
Cool. And what are some of the ones that you've had that you've loved that the kids have created? Can you describe?
I can totally, because one comes right to my mind. And I do want to mention too, if you want to tech this up, I've also had the kids then record their performances into GarageBand.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, and then add using iPads, iMacs, whatever you want. And then I've had them add backup tracks,
yes,
kind of like the Blue Man Group does. And then they realize, oh my, I really do need a steady beat. And it adds a whole nother layer to it. If you want to go there and if you have the time to go there, that can really be another whole kind of section to that lesson.
Yeah.
So some projects that stand out to me, one of the coolest ones I got was these kids took Pringles cans.
As you do.
Okay. And they took the plastic lids off and flipped them upside down, and they're metal on the bottom, or they used to.
That's right.
Okay. So, and what they did was they took cardboard and cut holes that they could put them through, and took like plastic bottles and build it up. So it was a stand, because we talked about how if it laid on the table, they said it wouldn't resonate the sound out because there was no place for the sound to go out. And then they cut the Pringles cans at different lengths to get different pitches. And they had like 5 or 6 of them in a row suspended, almost like a marimba. Sort of. And they created a whole little melody playing these Pringles cans. And it was fantastic. And it was simplistic in that, in how they utilized. But they, you can also, I've turned this lesson into younger grades when talking about science with recycling.
Oh, yeah.
And reduce, reuse, recycle, and talking about the landfills and things like that, and garbage, and how can we try to repurpose things. And there's a town in, I think it's South America, where they literally built an orchestra.
Yes, I remember that. That video did the rounds a lot on social media, and it pops up every now and again. Yes, I'll find the link to that too and pop it in.
So, you can even take it there if you wanted to. But that was one of my like awesome projects that came out of it. Another group took a funnel and put it on a pipe, and then they drilled holes for like finger holes.
Cool.
And they called it their crippity crumpet, I think. So it was kind of, and then they used a trumpet mouthpiece because they couldn't figure out how to make something that would mimic it and withstand with the materials they had. Nor did they really want to put their lips up to garbage. And they actually played, these kids were in the band. They were band kids. They actually played their band music on this instrument that they created.
Wow.
Like, it legitimately played the pitches and everything. It was awesome.
That's so cool. There's I just sprung to mind, there's a guy in Australia here who makes instruments out of weird, strange things. Like he's the one who has a video that is a carrot which is played with a clarinet mouthpiece, I think it is, from memory. And he just does a whole range of things like this, and it's crazy. But when he shows you how he does this, he actually makes it in front of you. So he gets out a carrot and a drill, and he drills a hole in the carrot and then drills, spots for the finger holes and sticks his mouthpiece in the top and plays it. I think maybe he even ended up doing it in a TED talk at some point, so I will find that and link to it. And his name escapes me. My memory is really bad today, so I will link to that too. And great videos and great resources there, but it can all tie in. So you could do a food orchestra maybe at some point, same sort of thing.
And I think I've seen the video on YouTube at some point. I've come across it.
It's another one that does the rounds.
So now there's a connection with culinary arts, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could talk to your food tech teacher.
Oh, my teacher.
Yeah.
But with STEAM, and I think what this draws out is, one of the biggest things is, what is your intention? Intentionality is so, so important. Intentionally selecting the standards. We probably, as music teachers, are already doing a lot of STEAM stuff, especially if you teach music technology. Yeah. Because most music technology is STEAM if you acknowledge the other content areas.
Yes, and that's what I find. Like, a lot of teachers are probably already doing it without realising, and it's just kind of reframing it, or maybe emphasising a part of the process that you are not already emphasising. So, with the music technology stuff, you might be using a synthesizer in, a software program to record a melody, and if you take it that step further and talk about the synthesis of sound, it's a fantastic lead-in, and then you can actually make something with it creative, and it's lots of fun.
Absolutely. And, so it's intentionally kind of selecting standards from both or all areas, dependent what it is, purposefully teaching all of those standards throughout the lesson or unit, and deliberately assessing both content areas. And that's where teachers sometimes struggle and get scared about it. From my experience, I hear a lot of teachers will be like, I'm not comfortable assessing the arts. You really want me to assess it?
Yes.
And I'm like, well, if your kids are producing something that utilizes it,
why not?
And you're in the room when they're learning it, then learn along the way.
Yeah.
And, I've heard teachers say, well, I don't really care what their product is in the arts. I really just care about my science, or I really just care about the math part. And I'm like, well, then don't do this.
Yeah.
Because if you don't care about the end result and how it's being used, then don't do it.
Yeah. It's so important.
And that equity is what is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I noticed that I was going to mention at the end anyway, that you're putting together to go into the Midnight Music community a STEAM training, which will be probably around an hour long or so. And I know in that, actually, and it may have even been in the previous one that you've done for us about the cross-curricular activities, but about, a lot of the things in that tick boxes of other subject areas, language arts or theatre or, all of those things. And why not tick those boxes there as well? Because it gets back to that advocacy for your program. If your principal sees that you're not only ticking the boxes for the music curriculum, but you're also ticking boxes for others as well, like what could be better than that? It's so good.
Absolutely.
It's such a great
thing. And especially in the days where standardized testing is so important.
Yeah.
So the more the kids get the content covered in other places, the more the learning is going to stick for them.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's important.
So great. Oh my gosh, there's so much here. I love everything that we've talked about today. I think we've pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover. So, it's really great. And just that idea that so much of this can be adapted for any age group, I think, is such an important thing. I'll actually also include links in the show notes to a couple of other teachers that I know who are elementary specialists, and they've got some examples on their blogs and websites of things that they're doing too. But it all ties in, with what Shawna's doing here. And it's just so good to see a few examples in action. And as soon as you see one or two examples, I think that's, for me anyway, that's when you start going, oh, I could totally take that and do this with it instead, or use that same concept with this whole other area and extend it in this way. And it's just a great thing to do. Lots of fun.
And I think it's important for music teachers and all arts teachers to realize that, we can be so stuck in our classrooms, but and we always complain that we don't get enough time with our kids. Language arts, they get double periods a day, but I see the kids every other day for one period.
Yeah.
But now if you can, latch on with STEAM and arts integration, and you can get the music and the arts happening in language arts, happening in science class, now you're helping to remedy your issue that you can't fix the schedule.
Yeah.
So now you're getting more time on your content in the other content.
In the other classes,
so it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, you're getting other teachers to teach with you. I love it. I love it.
Yes.
It's a great thing. So as I mentioned, for current members of the Midnight Music community, there will be STEAM training from Shawna going in there in the very near future. It'll be in the next couple of weeks or so. I'm going to say at the time of recording, it'll probably be sooner than that, but, give us a bit of a time frame. And, it's just so great. I love what you're doing, as I said before. Pretty sure we'll have to have a follow-up episode about another topic area at some point. We haven't really talked about the cross-curricular stuff that you do yet on the podcast, but we are doing that in the community too. But so many great things. So maybe you can come back as a regular, every few episodes and chat to us about what you're up to. So thank you, Shawna, for coming along today.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. All right. I will put the link to all of those things that we talked about in the show notes. There's a lot of things. I've taken notes as we've gone. I was actually taking so many detailed notes at one point because I loved the ideas. And then I realised I'm recording this and I don't need to write it down because I can go back to the recording. But I will, for everyone else listening, I will actually notate some of the things that we've talked about and just give an outline there because it's so, so useful. So thank you, Shawna, and we'll speak to you again sometime soon.
Thank you.
That's all for today's show. If you'd like more help with music technology through lesson plans, training courses and personalised support, you can join me inside the Midnight Music community. If you'd like more information about the community and a special offer for podcast listeners, go to midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/56. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.